next function that we are going to talk about is called input function. And I'm going to put it here. Similar to other functions, as soon as you put it, it's going to turn purple. You need to have the parentheses at the end of it. This function input gets an input from the user or the keyword, if you want to call that. So as a user, as a person that is running or interacting with that piece of code, is going to ask you for the input as the code is going to be executed. So instead of, for instance, hard coding the values that you have right here for 50 or 5,000, you can ask that as the program is going to be executed. So while it's running the code, you can ask it, instead of having this one, you say, okay, I want the input to come while the code is going to be executed. So you get an input through the execution of the code. The input goes into it, assigned to a value, and then everything goes right exactly as it was as before. Okay, so let's see how it is done. First, again, similar to the previous one, we are going to practice that in the shell, and then we are going to bring it back to our code. So we are going to type it as it is. Input, you see, turns purple. And here inside input, with input function, you can pass at most one argument to it. That means passing either 0 argument to it, like leaving it empty like this, or passing one argument to it. So at most one argument. So if you leave it empty, it's going to basically going to wait for you to input something. You see, it's like blinking. It hasn't have those 3 less than signs. It's waiting for you. It's not going to do anything else until you put something there, right? So as soon as you put that, it is like, okay, cool. I got that input from you, and I'm going to continue with whatever you have here. So since we put it in the shell, the next line is like, again, waiting for your command. The other way that you can use it is you can pass a value to it. You can pass a statement here saying, okay, please, if I can type, please enter a value, and you can have that. Usually what I put is like, whatever you want to get from user, put a message here so they know exactly what you're asking them to input. So you put the message here, usually end it with a colon or equal sign or something and a space. So the user input is not completely attached to the message that you put. So if I don't put it here, the input that is going to ask user is going to be right attached to the message that you have. So I put 5 here, but if I try to put that space, it's going to look nicer. It's just for spacing purposes to make the output to look better. So I always put that space in there. So it's like kind of formatting the way that you want. So now I'm putting the value. One thing that is very important to notice here is I tried input function 3 times here. So this is the first time, second time, and third time. Every time the input that I put came out as a string type. Came out as a string type and then a string type. So input function always gets or creates a string type for you. No exceptions. Always is going to be a string type. So whatever you put as a value for input is going to go and be saved as a string value. Okay, so now I have this string 5, which is a numeric string. Now what? Do I have access to it? So as soon as you put it there, is like you put it and then it's gone. Right? I don't have any access to it. If I want to use that value for some operation, for some stuff later on in my code, I don't have any way to access that, right? So the best way of using input in most cases is you have your input function and you store its value into a variable. So you create your bucket, you create your box, you create your chest, and you get the value from user and put it there. You save it, you store it. So later on, if you want it, you have an identifier, you have a name that is associated to that value. You say, okay, what is the value inside that box? What is the value inside that bucket? And it gives you that. Let's see an example here. So I'm going to say num equal to, or num1 is equal to input. And then I'm going to say, please enter a value, which is my message. Please enter a value. And then it's going to basically show that message to your user. It's going to get an input. So let's put 2. And then value is going to be assigned to this variable that I set, okay? Get the input from user, and whatever that value is, assign it to this variable num1. So now if I press what is num1, if I ask it, if I press enter, it's going to give me the value I entered. And it's type of string, as we discussed. Input function always creates a string type. So you have access to your value now. If you want to use it for other stuff later on in your code, you can do that, right? So let's go back to our program now and implement that piece to it. So like we can have this part implemented here. So you're going to get an input from user, and then you're assigning that value into num1. And then you're going to have it again and assign it to this variable num2. So you're getting 2 inputs from user. You ask, the first line is going to go through line 9, ask for the input, assigns it to num1. It asks for another input and assigns it to num2. If you want, you can have 2 separate messages. So enter, like for instance, the first value, enter the second value. So you can have separate messages, different messages. So you know this is the first one, the second one, or this one was a value, this one was a name. So you can have messages that are appropriate for the value that you want to get from the user. So now if you go ahead and run it, you're going to be some interesting stuff. We're going to focus on the first 2 part of it. Actually, let me comment the section. So it's not going to go through the stuff later on. We're just going to get those inputs from user. So please enter the first value. That is the first message that we have. I'm going to put 5, and then it's going to, after you put that 5, it's going to be assigned to num1. It's done with that line. It's going to move on to the next line. The next line is another input function. You're going to get another input from user because we needed 2 values. If you need 5 values, you will have 5 different input functions. So here, second values do 2, and both values are stored. If you want to see num1, it shows it. Num2, it shows it.